we usually think of energy expenditure, we think of lean mass. And by far, lean mass is the best predictor of your metabolic rate or your energy expenditure, let's put it that way. Now, I wanted to make it clear that even though that's the system that spends the most amount of energy, or the components in your body that spends the most amount of energy, it doesn't run on its own. It receives information from different systems. And that's when I brought this diagram that we actually link your adipose tissue with your brain and how your brain controls everything else. So now, we learned that we have this long-term system or mechanism that controls body weight. And this long-term system depends on how much your adipose tissue increases in size or reduces in size or stays the same. Because the way it communicates with the brain through many different hormones, but the main one, and probably the one that we know the most, is leptin, because leptin is released proportionally to the size of the adipose tissue, and it sends a message to the central nervous system, especially in the hypothalamus, and it controls, it senses energy availability, and with that, it can actually control whether you're going to increase energy expenditure or you're going to reduce energy expenditure or you're not going to do anything. Keep the same, because everything is under normal or standard conditions. And this is the physiological mechanism, and we learned that we have two regulators. One is the anabolic, the other one is the catabolic center. So they regulate each other. So the anabolic center depends on NPY or neuropeptide Y. And when it's high, it stimulates hunger and energy expenditure. And on the opposite side, when you have plenty of energy stored in your body, leptin goes up and then activates the catabolic center, CRH, which is corticotropin releasing hormone. It works as a signal that promotes satiety and increases energy expenditure. So this way you have this physiological mechanism that is constantly running without you even thinking of it. And the implications that it has is because if the other side is activated, it means that you're going to be hungry and your energy expenditure tends to go down. And the implication for this is that in the long run, it makes it very difficult for people that lose weight to maintain body weight because your body is constantly fighting against to bring it back to what it was before. So that was the main message. One thing that we didn't speak much was about the other higher brain centers, because this is not only, your metabolism is not only regulated by the hypothalamus. The hypothalamus probably is the effector, is the organ that really sends the final signal to what to do, but it's also influenced by other areas in your brain that can actually override or not what that hypothalamus, that specific physiological system does in your hypothalamus. So that's what we call, these are higher brain areas or centers that actually also affect the activity of the hypothalamus. So how does it actually, in reality, how does it affect our feeding behavior? This is an important thing because it also has to do with the food choices that you make. So you have external cues or things that come from the environment that determine how you're going to relate to the food. So now, a simple example for this is when you eat food, or let's say you have lunch and you ate enough, you are full, you don't need to eat anymore, you don't want to eat anymore, but then they bring you dessert. So there is always room for dessert. Why is that? Because you know the taste, it looks good, and you have that memory that gives you pleasure. So obviously you're going to eat, not because you need, you eat because it's good. So that's what they call hedonic eating, and it is determined mostly by these external cues that you receive from the environment. You don't necessarily need to be hungry at all to be able to take in a good, or like a chocolate cake, or something like ice cream, or something that you like. Because you have this previous memory that when you taste it, it's good. And then you take it, even though you're absolutely not hungry at all. Now, there are other implications, because this is just what they call, as I said, hedonic eating. And there are some implications that are obvious. But there are also some other situations that the environment affects you that make you eat because you have anxiety, or you may be eating because you have some kind of psychological distress that actually changes the way how you relate to food. So these are all things that, again, override this, very often, this physiological mechanism that might be telling you, look, you don't need food, but you use food as a different, or you relate to food independent of the signals that are arising to regulate your appetite. And this is true. There are two specific conditions that we usually can associate to that too. One is obesity, because people can be overeating constantly for multiple reasons, and they gain excess amount of weight, even though their body's trying to fight by increasing energy expenditure, but you override it because you eat so much more that you go beyond the capacity of your system to actually compensate for it. And on the other hand, you have a condition called anorexia nervosa. I don't know if you've heard of this, and it's very common. Well, very common. It's not rare to find people who have anorexia nervosa. What is this? They are hungry, but they don't eat because when they look at themselves in the mirror, they think that their image, or they see themselves as having more or being bigger than what they want it to be. They're hungry. The symptom of hunger, the system is activated. It's trying to make them eat more, even lower the energy expenditure, but they are so strict that they can override that and voluntarily not taking food. Or they even, because they're hungry and they like the food, they eat, but then they puke. So you have all these different alterations in feeding behavior that are usually more associated with these environmental factors that affect these higher brain centers. So that's a completely different, I mean, it's not what the most people will experiment, but it's not difficult, or it's not rare that you see people on both sides of this equation. And again, it doesn't mean that everybody who is obese is because they have some kind of psychological disturbance. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that that could be one case. And not everybody, but most people who are anorexic, usually they have some self-image issue that they cannot relate. There is a discrepancy between the way they look and the way how they perceive themselves. So what I'm trying to say here is that you can often override the system because these external cues can be so potent that it changes the way how you behave with food. And again, regardless of being hungry or not being hungry.